Chapter 2. This is Book 3. Description of the first cause. Yama explains airborne Brahma to death. Will without form or action. Vashishta resumed. Now listen as I relate the story of Akashaja, the airborne Brahman, which will be precious to your ears and will enable you to better understand the drift of this book of creation. There lived a Brahmin named Akashaja, who always sat reclined in his meditation and was ever inclined to do good to all creatures. Finding him long-lived, Death thought to himself, "Only I am imperishable, and I devour all beings one by one. How is it that I cannot stuff myself with this airborne? I find my teeth as blunt on him as the edge of a sword on solid rock." So thinking, he proceeded to the home of the Brahmin, intent upon making an end of him. For who is not so dull in nature that he is not alert in his practice? But as Death was about to enter Akashaja's house, he was opposed by a fire as powerful as that in the final destruction of the last day of the world's dissolution. He passed through the flames and entered the house, where, seeing the holy man before him, he greedily stretched out his hand to grab him. Even with his 100 hands, Death was unable to grasp the holy man, just as it is impossible for the strongest to withstand a determined man in his habitual course. Death then went to his lord Yama, the god of the underworld, to answer his question why he could not devour the airborne being. Yama explained, "Death, do not overly trust your own strength that enables you to destroy the living. It is the act of the dying person that is the chief cause of his death and nothing else. Therefore, be diligent and find out about the acts of the person you intend to kill, because it is only with their assistance that you are able to seize your prey." Thereupon, Death gladly wandered about in all places under the horizons. He roved over inhabited lands as he did through empty and river lands. He traversed forests and jungles, marshy and rocky grounds, and maritime coasts. He traveled to foreign lands and islands, and pried through their wildernesses, cities and towns. He searched through kingdoms and countries, villages and deserts. He surveyed the entire earth to find out some act of the Brahman or any part of it. At last, Death, despite all his search and efforts, came to find the acts of the airborne Brahman to be as nothing as the offspring of a barren woman, and the Brahman's mind as fixed in meditation as if it were a rock. Then Death returned from his reconnoitering explorations to his all-knowing master Yama and sought his advice, as servants do in matters of doubt and difficulty. Death addressed Yama, saying, "Tell me, my lord, where are the acts of the airborne Brahman to be found?" After much thought, Yama replied as follows. Know, O death, that this airborne seer has no act whatever, because he is born of empty air. Therefore his doings are all null and void. Whoever is born of air is as pure as air itself, and has no combination of cause or actions, such as all embodied beings. He has no relationship with acts of his prior existence. He is as nothing as the child of a barren woman, like one unborn, uncreated, and unbegotten. Want of causes has made him a pure, empty being, and the lack of prior acts has made him as nothing, as an ethereal tree. Deprived of former acts, his mind is not ruffled like those of others, nor is there any act in his present state whereby he may become a morsel to death. Such is the soul seated in the sheath of void, and remaining forever as the simple form of its own causality, and not guided by any extraneous causation whatever. It has no prior deed, nor does it do anything at present, but continues as something like an intelligence with the form of air. Our inference that the soul causes the action of breathing and motion is a mere supposition, because the soul is devoid of every thought or tendency toward action. It sits meditating on itself as inseparable from the supreme intelligence, just as images are inseparable from the mind of the painter and sculptor. The self-born Brahma is as intimately connected with the objects of his thought as fluidity is associated with water and the void with the sky. His soul is as immanent in the supreme as motion is inherent in the wind. He has neither the accumulated acts of past lives nor those of its present state. He is produced without the cooperation of accompanying causes, and being free from prior motives, it is not subjected to the sufferings that attend human life. It is found to be nothing other than its own cause, and having no other cause for itself, it is said to be self-produced. Say, how can you lay hold of a person who has not done no act, and is not in the act of doing anything at present? It is only subject to you when he thinks itself immortal. You are easily able to take anyone who believes his soul to be of this earth and thinks himself to be an earthly being, because this Brahman disowns the material body. He is a formless being. Therefore, it is as hard for you to enthrall him as it is to use a rope to tie the air. Death replied, saying, Tell me, my lord, how may the unborn Aja, or the self-born Swayambhuj, be produced out of vacuum? And how can an earthly or elemental body be both and not be? Yama replied, This Brahm is neither born nor is nothing at any time, but remains the same forever, like the light of intelligence, of which there is no decay. Upon the end of creation, there remains nothing except the tranquil, imperishable, and infinite Brahman himself in his spiritual form. This is the nature of the everlasting void, too subtle in its essence and devoid of all attributes. but viewing the present before its mind, the stupendous cosmos in the form of a huge mountain at the beginning of recreation. Being of the nature of consciousness, it is imperishable. And those who regard spirit to have any material body are liable to perish with it, like all embodied beings. Thus, in the beginning, this Brahman remained in his state of unalterable, empty consciousness in the womb of emptiness. It is purely of the nature of empty understanding and of the form of a vast expanse of omniscience. It has neither body nor organism, no act or agency, nor desire of any kind in itself. That which is simply emptiness and pure light, unlike an embodied being, is never beset by the traps of new desires. It has nothing to know or see without itself. The only conception that we can have of it is that it resembles an extended intelligence. Under these circumstances, how is it susceptible to any earthly or other eternal form? Therefore, O death, give up your attempts to lay hold of the Brahman. Hearing these words from Yama, Death thought about the impracticality of anyone laying hold on an empty void, and he sorrowfully returned to his own abode. Brahma said, Sage, you said that Brahma is your great father. I think you meant to say that your father is the unborn, self-born, universal soul and consciousness. Ceased speaking. What I had described to you, Rama, is Brahma, and the previous story about the discussions between Death and Yama also regards Brahma. Again, when Death, over the course of a manvantara of time, has made an end to all living beings, he thought himself strong enough to make an attempt to bear down upon the lotus-born Brahma also. It was then that he was rebuked by Yama, saying, It is your habit that makes you go on your accustomed course of killing. But the super-ethereal form of Brahma is beyond your reach because it simply has the nature of the mind connected only with its thoughts and having no concern with the actual form of things. Brahma is wonderfully empty consciousness, having the faculty of thought. This consciousness, being only emptiness, has neither any cause that created it, nor any effect created by it. As the insubstantial principle of will in men manifests itself without being connected with material forms, so the self-born Brahma manifests to all in his own material nature. Like strings of pearl appearing in a clear sky, and like the forms of cities seen in a dream, the self-born Brahma is manifest of himself without special relation to external objects, as there is no beholder or nothing beholden of the solitary supreme spirit which is consciousness itself. So the mind manifests anything beholden to the solitary scripture. It is the mind's capacity to will that is called a Brahman. Will being a spiritual faculty, it has no connection with any material substance. As the mind of the painter is filled with images of various things, so the mind of Brahma is full of figures of all created beings. The self-born Brahma is manifest in his own mind as Brahma is manifested in the empty sphere of his consciousness. He is without beginning, middle, or end. He is described as having a male figure when in reality, and like the offspring of a barren woman, he has no body. So this is a very interesting description of what? This airborne Brahman, that is, Akashaja. Akashaja is just a name that has been given to someone who is identified with and has become the silent witness. Akashaja was the name of the personality, the body, of the enlightened person who became the silent witness, not a name for the silent witness. Akashaja was very fixed in his meditation, meaning he was established as the silent witness. And the silent witness is eternal, can never be destroyed by any of the activities that occur in a relative universe. And this unborn, uncreated, and unbegotten silent witness, eternal, without beginning, without end, it says is inseparable from supreme intelligence. The silent witness is also given the name the self-born Brahma. And the silent witness, we're told, has no body. The self-born Brahma. Chapter 3. Subtle and gross bodies. Formless mind, Brahma, wills the appearance of forms. Ram said, "It is even so as you have said, that the mind is a pure essence and has no connection with the earth or other material substances. Mind is truly Brahma himself. Now tell me, O Holy One, why the memory of this former state does not cause his birth, as it is in the case of mine, yours, and all other beings." The sister replied, "Whoever had a former body, accompanied with the acts of his previous existence, necessarily retains its memories, which are the cause of its being reborn. But when the Brahman is known to have no prior act, how is it possible for him to have memory of anything? Therefore, he exists without any other cause except the causation of his own mind. It is by his own causality that the divine spirit is self-born and is himself his own spirit. He is everlasting. His body is born of itself from the self-existent Brahman. The unborn or self-born Brahma has no material body whatever, except his subtle spirit body, Ativahi, or astral body. Brahma said, the everlasting body is one thing, and the mortal body is another. Now tell me, sage, whether all created beings have a subtle body like that of Brahma. Vasishtha replied, all created beings produced of a cause have two bodies, subtle and gross. But the unborn being, which is without a cause, has only one body. The uncreated Brahma is the cause of all created beings. But the uncreated spirit, having no cause for itself, has only one body. The prime Lord of creatures has no material body, but manifests himself in the empty form of his spiritual body. His body is composed of only mind, and he has no connection with the earth or any other material substance. He is the first Lord of creatures who stretched creation from his empty body. All creation is only forms of images or ideas in his empty mind. They have no other pattern or originality in their nature. It is a truth well known to everyone that everything is of the same nature with its cause. Brahma is a non-existent being in the manner of perfect consciousness. He is purely a mind form. He is an intellectual entity, not material. He is the pure cause of all material productions in the physical world, and he is born of himself with his moving power that his expanse of creation came to be spread in the same ratio as the currents of air and water are in proportion to the impetus given to them. This creation shining so bright to our sight derives its light from the luminous mind of the formless Brahma, and it appears real to our conceptions. What we experience in dreams is the best illustration, like the enjoyment of sexual bliss in a dream. In a dream, an unreal object of desire presents itself as an actual gain to our fond and false imagination. The empty, immaterial, and formless spirit is described as the self-born and corporeal lord of creatures in the form of the first male. He remains imperceptible in his state of pure consciousness, but becomes manifest to all by the evolution of his will. He cannot be discerned in his absolute state of actions, but becomes conspicuous to us in the display of his nature in creation. Brahma is the divine power of will. He is personified as the first male of creation, but he is devoid of any physical body. He has only the spiritual form of the mind, and he is the sole cause of the existence of the three worlds. It is Brahma's will that makes the self-born exert its energies, just as a human desires impel all mankind to action, and as the empty mind manifests itself as a mountain of desires. Then it forgets its everlasting and incorporeal nature and assumes to itself a solid material body and shows itself in the shape of a deceptive apparition. But Brahma, who is of an unsullied understanding, is not involved in forgetting himself. That occurs through the transformation of his unknowable nature to the known state of will. Being unborn of material substance, he sees no appearance, like others who are exposed by their ignorance to the misleading errors of falsehood that appear before them like a mirage. As Brahma is merely the form of the mind and not composed of any material substance, so the world, being the product of the eternal mind, is of the same nature as its original source. Again, as the uncreated Brahma has no cause for himself, so this creation has no cause other than himself. Therefore, there is no difference between product and producer, and it is certain that the work must be as perfect as the other. There is nothing like cause and effect to be found in this creation, because the three worlds are only prototypes of the archetype of the divine mind. The world is stretched out in the model of the divine mind. It is not formed by any other Holy Spirit. Creation is as immanent in the mind of God as fluidity is inherent in water. The mind spreads out this extended unreality of the world like castles in the air and builds paradise cities. There is no such thing as materiality, which is as false a conception as mistaking a rope for a snake. Hence, it is impossible for Brahma and other beings to exist as individual bodies. Even spiritual bodies are non-existent to enlightened understanding. As for the material body, it has no room in existence. Man, Manu, who derives his name from his mind, Manas, is a form of the will soul called Brinchi, the creator, a name of Brahma. His dominion is the mental or intellectual world, Manorajam, where all things appear in the form of realities. The mind is the creative Brahma, Birinchintoas, through the exercise of its inherent will, Sankalpa, intent, volition, or beginning or creation. It displays itself in the form of the visible universe by development of its own essence.